in this case in the form of a feature presentation. All right, so the first chapter of our tale is going to be called The Call of the Sea. It sort of what drew us to hatch such a scheme and sort of ditch the ordinary and go off script, if you will.
Yeah, so I grew up cruising with my grandparents since I was a baby, and I always had in the back of my mind to go off cruising one day. After college sailing, Tim and I teamed up to race together, and we competed all over the world. That was half of our lifetimes ago, and we've been racing and cruising together ever since. So we were both really drawn to being on the water, so it's part of what continues to draw the two of us together today.
And our kids up on stage here with us today have been sailing since they were just weeks old. They're really used to being on a boat. If their artwork reflects their interests, then they too have a strong affinity for the sea. Furthermore, we all like being on or by the seaside, growing up on the sandbars and beaches of Cape Cod, and has made being on the water sort of our happy place. You know, as we started raising our boys and cruising aboard our Catboat Kathleen, we didn't know it, but we were sort of preparing for this adventure all along. Those diaper changes at inopportune times coming into a crowded anchorage, or stuffing a pack-and-play crib down below on a little catboat, and the stress of having kids that couldn't swim on a boat all the time. This was sort of all practice. And it turned out our family went through all that, and we were sort of ready to go off cruising. But we were about to shake things up quite a bit, a little bit different than our weekend or week-long cruises. And so we wanted to write down sort of why we wanted to do an extended cruise. And we wrote down a few reasons. You know, we knew we weren't going to go sit at a beach and sort of drink coffee till cocktails like you might do on a vacation. This is to say, it wasn't going to be, we knew it wasn't going to be a relaxing time necessarily. And it's not relaxing is something we sort of repeated over and over, at least our first year when we were new to it. So what were we going for? Well, like I said, we wrote down this, what we call a mission statement that we would sometimes refer back to. And then we committed to making it happen. So chapter 2 is about planning and casting off. And you know, once we decided, we started planning. The first thing was actually to save up some money. We kind of pinched our pennies for several years to build up a cruising kitty. And we budgeted to spend about a third of what we spent on land, which turned out to be a pretty accurate number. So while saving up, we searched for a boat that would take us safely to the tropics. So we had to find a boat, we had boat work to do, we had to sell just about everything we owned that wasn't coming with us, including our car. We cleaned out and then rented out our house while we were gone, and we quit our jobs. That was a big step. We did a bunch of planning for homeschooling the children. And finally, we had to think about provisioning. So I packed a cooler full of chocolate chip cookies and thought we were ready to go. We commissioned a dinghy to be built by Bill Sauerbread. He built us a sailing and rowing dinghy, and we had oars to build. We did have one major dilemma to consider in the planning stage. You see, we already owned a cruising boat, a 28-foot CC Handley catboat named Kathleen to be exact, but we weren't sure she was up for the task of such a long journey. On the one hand, we knew that Henry Plummer had taken a catboat all the way to Florida, and David Hayes, the author of My Old Man and the Sea, had even sailed a 22-foot catboat from the Bahamas nonstop to New London. Check out Bulletin 64 for that impressive story. But we had two younger children to consider, and we certainly didn't want them to end up like Henry Plummer's son, who came back from the trip described in The Boy, Me, and the Cat, never to step foot in a catboat again. At the same time, we were trying to build up our cruising kitty, to use that phrase again from Larry and Lynn Party's books, and the purchase of another boat would sort of eat into those savings. So when my youngest brother let us know that he too was looking for a cruising boat, we figured out that we could take the boat off his hands for the winter and then return it to him in Rhode Island for the summer while we moved to live aboard our summer boat, Kathleen. So we joked later on that we would own the winter half and he owned the summer half of this new boat. So the picture shown up here is actually on moving day, when we were putting Kathleen away for the winter and moving aboard the boat that's just off the camera to the left in the picture. All right, so let's take a look at these two boats. On the left is a Betsy. She's the boat that we lived on in the wintertime, and on the right is our Catboat Kathleen. So we would live aboard Kathleen from about May to October, and then we'd switch over to Betsy. Now, some moves are difficult, but in this case, we rafted up the two boats and then took our, one bag of clothes, all that we owned, and right onto the other boat. So it was really, really easy process. Diving in a little bit more about Kathleen, many catboaters here know about her. She's a C.C. Hanley design from the early 1900s, but was built recently by the Beetle Shop and launched in 2006. This has been our primary cruising boat for almost 20 years now. I say primary because you can see from the pictures that there are some small boats that go along with her, but hey, we're boat people, Here's a picture of the cockpit. She, like all catboats, the cockpit's blessed with room galore. This was taken at a Friday night game at one of the Cuddy Hunk rendezvous with some colorful CBA characters aboard. And here's the same crew, just 20 years younger. A little interior shot on Kathleen. There's a queen-size bed to port and a galley to starboard, both off camera, but we're looking forward here into the settee area, and take note of the headroom on the boat.
Yeah. All right, and Betsy is a J32. She's the cruising version of the racing J-boats, so quite the opposite from Kathleen. Modern construction, deep fin keel, standing headroom, 2 triangular sails, and even an engine. The similarity with Kathleen is that she's also an excellent sailing boat. So here is a wobbly shot of us in the Bahamas. This relatively short boat sported a large davit system on the stern that lifted our dinghy and was home to 300 watts of solar panels. This is the salon down below with a folding table. This was our dining room / classroom / boys' bedroom. And I was really excited to get aboard Betsy and have standing headroom to cook. So little things. Although we were the smallest boat that we encountered with families aboard, Betsy was plush for us. This is the forward V berth with a door and even a closet.
All right, yeah, the boat tour also includes our dinghy that lived in the davits aboard Betsy and was towed behind Kathleen. It served as our dinghy and our car and our life raft, and also as an icebreaker when the boys went to, as we put it, meet friends they haven't met yet. Here's a picture of them doing just that. Here's another picture of Hadley. She was built by Bill Sauerbrey, like I said, to his own design. He named the boat after our beloved dog, who was in turn named after the harbor in Woods Hole. She's a rowing boat too. She's got 2 rowing stations, and although we did break a couple of oars, they're really long because the boat's so wide. They are quite a bit more reliable than an outboard engine like the other cruisers had. In fact, we had to tow someone with a broken down dinghy engine once. We really liked having the hard dinghy to sail it and row her around, and she turned out to sort of be our calling card in that we were known for the dinghy. Okay, let's talk about where we went. In essence, we spent our summers aboard Kathleen, sailing around the Cape and the islands, and then come fall, we'd head south to the Bahamas for the winter. We initially planned to do it for a year or so, but ended up living aboard, all told, nearly 2.5 years. So to start out, we quit work just in time to head off for the summer, leaving just after school ended in June of 2021. And by July 4th, we were moored up in Wild Harbor, a tiny catboat-friendly spot on Buzzards Bay, what we call the armpit of Cape Cod. That was our base camp for the summers, and we travel around the Cape and Islands from there. Living on the boat there was really cheap waterfront property, I always say, and people were amazed to see us living on a pretty small boat. Jay and Diane Webster will recognize this location on the picture on the right. That's their mooring for the Marshall cat Ishmael in the foreground, but as usual, they're off sailing. Come fall, we'd head down the East Coast. We would run this route twice, actually. This was a pictorial we put together for Karen's blog of our travels, and it shows our route on one of the trips down and the ports of call along the way. And we would take our time heading down. We enjoyed this part of the trip. It took us about 2 months to get to the Bahamas each time. And our second trip was quite a bit better. We joked it was twice as good, actually. We took one good long chunk of the voyage from Cape Cod to Cape May with my brother Mark on board. And here's a video from that sail.
It is Friday, the 14th of October, 2022. Jamie, how are you doing? These guys just woke up. Then you want to steer? Do some steering? Just now starting it light in the distance. Big waves, we got some pretty big waves.
So we had some excellent sailing. We also had some calms. To make miles, even when there was no wind, we would cut into the intercoastal waterway and run through the canals. Another shot here of the ICW. Some beautiful trips, even though we weren't sailing at this point. We did enjoy the scenery. And we had some more stormy passages offshore. But with good forecasts, we went downwind 90% of the time, and the boat's just a lot more comfortable when you're going downhill. This video here was taken on a passage from Beaufort, North Carolina down to Charleston, and was memorable for the steep, short period waves and winds around 30 knots that blew through the night. Our oversized autopilot was doing okay, but we felt it was faster and safer, not to mention more fun, to hand steer the boat. And here's another video of some windier weather. Karen still has a smile. And on the right, some really fine sailing conditions in the ocean. So we got a mix of all different stuff. It was something we were curious going in, what's going to be like out there. So we got all sorts of weather. Eventually we got to some really warm weather and extraordinary sailing conditions especially in the islands of the Bahamas. Now meanwhile, back on Cape Cod, Kathleen and everyone else was frozen in their winter berths. You can see the ice in the picture here. Okay, a quick geography lesson. The Bahamas are actually really close to Florida. They're only 60 miles apart at the closest point. And this is a picture of the chart of the Bahamas that hung on the cabin wall or BETSY. And we marked up our path as we went on our way, and a black marker line that shows our path the second winter there, with travels as far south as the Ragged Islands, which are a thin and remote island chain that stretches to within 60 miles of Cuba. So there's over 700 islands in the Bahamas, and we only explored a small percentage.
So for this chapter, we'll play through some photos that capture the beauty of the Bahamas better than our words can really capture it.
many people use the term back to reality when we came back home, which for some reason irked us a bit. And upon reflection, back to reality is sort of the mindset of taking a trip or a vacation. And this adventure of ours, we didn't feel like it was just a trip. This really was our reality. All right, chapter 6 is about wildlife. While we were living a pretty wild life of our own, we got to experience the Bahamian wildlife really up close and personal. So the boys are going to talk about what they saw.
This is a sea star we saw in the Bahamas.
Okay, so this one is we caught overnight on our boat, and they fly and they just land up on our boat. So in the morning.
This is a sea turtle, and it was really friendly, and it went really close, not very deep underwater, and we got to pet it.
So here is Jamie petting a stingray. They might seem harmful, but just as long as you don't step on their tail, then you're fine.
Oh, here's a couple more wild animals.
This is a manatee, also called a sea cow, and they go underwater.
So this is a relatively small conch shell. The conch is local food for the Bahamas. We ate some conch fritters and conch salad.
This is a Nassau grouper, and they are really endangered.
So here, this was one of my favorite parts of the trip. We got to jump in and swim with these dolphins, and yeah, they're just beautiful creatures.
This is a lemon shark, because it is yellow like a lemon.
This here is a bull shark. We took this picture just by jumping in the water and then jumping out.
Yeah, so I am definitely a member of the Jaws generation, and I was really afraid of sharks when we first got to the Bahamas. But we learned more and more about them, and actually, as long as you don't have a sort of a bloody dead fish on the end of your spear, you're really safe swimming around sharks. Here's Jamie, who's clearly not a member of the Jaws generation, swimming amongst these nurse sharks, and nurse sharks are actually very harmless. You can pet these types of sharks. All right, so for activities, what did we do all day? First thing in the morning was usually reading in school. So the boys were doing boat schooling while we were gone. Here's another picture of a classroom. We did 2 or 3 hours of schoolwork a day when we got the chance. So, and just those couple hours really kept us on schedule, actually. The boys got into arts and crafts, Ben taught himself to draw, and while Jamie wrote prolifically about a particularly mischievous stuffed animal in his stories.
sold a lot of bracelets in the Bahamas, and we sold them to tourists.
And there was some boat building that was done on board. And a lot of friends. There was other kids out there cruising, and the boys met as many of them as they could. Here's a big crew of the kids in Georgetown in the Exumas. Maybe a quick note about some of the other cruisers we met out there. You know, we came from a sailing background. A lot of the other cruisers did not. They were maybe adventurers and travelers and such. And I think everyone in this room is going to be overqualified in the sailing department to do a trip like this, believe it or not. We were a little shocked that a lot of the other folks weren't great at sailing. Even the parents met some friends. And we did a lot of swimming. We're always in the water. When we find a good shore break, we would do a lot of body surfing. There's a lineup one day. And the boys playing in the water. But snorkeling was really our #1 passion and pastime in the Bahamas. We spent a lot of time searching out other places to see coral. Sadly, the coral is going away pretty quickly these days, and we made it our mission to show it to our boys before it was all gone. There's Karen goofing around for the camera. Did we mention how clear the water is in the Bahamas? This is a shot 35 feet under, and you can see for 100 yards. On this particular day, I remember dropping the anchor in 100 feet of water and watching it hit the bottom. It's absolutely incredible. And there was also other fun activities we did. Now the summertime activities were a little different. The boys were embedded with the sailing classes and a big group of friends at Wild Harbor Yacht Club. Here they are with their opties. And by traveling back north for the summers, the boys really didn't miss out on sort of their regular summer that they would have had otherwise. And neither did we. Karen and I and the boys were sail Kathleen around all summer in our typical places. Looks like the middle of the ocean somewhere, but this is actually just Vineyard Sound on a day when the wind and current were going against each other. And we traveled to our regular rendezvous. So we went to the Marshall Marine Rendezvous, which is up in Cape Narram, inconveniently located behind a bridge for those who don't have an engine. Here's the crew that bested the entire fleet at the Pat West Gaff Rig and Schooner race out on Martha's Vineyard. We were up against Brilliant that year out of Mystic Seaport, and the likes of Juno, another 65-foot schooner. And by coming back to New England for the summer, we'd do our normal summer routine. One photographer got our picture sailing up the channel in Cutty Hunk, where we frequent, and I was proud to see it made the cover of my favorite magazine. And we'd meet up with friends as usual. Septembers were reserved for beetle cat racing in West Falmouth Harbor out in Cape Cod. And here's a photo I had to put in from the famous beetle cat photographer, Emily Ferguson, who's probably standing in the crowd right here today.
A large focus of mine was planning, provisioning, and preparing 3 meals a day aboard to keep the family fed and healthy. It took up a lot of time, but luckily we had a lot of time. So this is the boys' favorite meal of sushi, which they ask for all the time. quesadillas, fried plantains, rice and beans, salad. We make lots of burritos aboard, and luckily Ben makes a mean guacamole. It's great to have an oven aboard Betsy.
So here we are with our big haul of coconut water after a morning of climbing coconut trees.
So in addition to coconuts, we got our own lobsters. The Caribbean spiny lobsters were plentiful, and we got practiced at spotting them. The lobster cooks up nicely. So here we are spearfishing for lionfish. Lionfish are invasive predatory reef fish that have negative effects on the reef habitat as they eliminate fish species that keep algae in check. People are encouraged to remove lionfish from the waters, and we were happy to do so. Avoiding the poisonous spines, I learned to fillet the lionfish. They make a nice white flaky fish when cooked with lemon butter and garlic. Fresh produce was sparse in the Bahamas. So here's one of the fun dinners where I took out any and all ingredients that we had left to try and come up with something to eat. The out islands of the Bahamas are very far removed from what we enjoy in this part of the world. So there are not many people. The islands don't offer up a lot for survival, so there's little commerce. The ports are small and very shallow, so there aren't any large ships bringing supplies. The so-called mail boat does the rounds from Florida, but the goods can be on board for a week. Not a good recipe for delivering fresh fruits and vegetables. I was able to supplement our vegetables with Sierra Soups, microgreen sprouter, super greens powder, and we all took vitamins. COVID trained me well for baking bread, and we baked bread daily on the boat out of necessity. And we had certain foods that we missed from back home, and the biggest one for all four of us was pizza. As I prepared bread daily, I realized that I could just roll the dough out and throw some sauce and cheese on it, and voila.
Okay, re-entry is it's actually a term that cruisers use to refer to moving back ashore. And it's certainly different to be back ashore. I stopped looking at where we were a year ago on my phone recently. Here's Betsy sailing away from the Bahamas for the last time with our friend Elena giving us the conch salute. We've been with her and her family for the past 3 months. And so after saying goodbye to our friends, we sailed north and made our longest passage. We did a 3-day and 3-night trip from the Abacos in the Bahamas all the way to Southport, North Carolina. And back home in New England, we were shocked about a couple of things. Grocery stores, as Karen mentioned, and just shocked that different retailers were sort of constantly trying to sell you something. Like Karen mentioned, there was very little commerce in the Bahamas. So the spending economy is really strong here compared to there, where there's just not a lot to buy. I think maybe people there get their so-called dopamine hit from just the natural world instead of clicking on Amazon like we do here in the US maybe. There's definitely a difference. And we were back to Cape Cod for one last summer aboard Kathleen to wind down our adventure and sort of wind up on our re-entry plans. And we had to uncheck all those boxes we ticked off when we left. Now it was time to get a car, get a job, move back into our house, get the boys enrolled in school again, and even prepare to sell our beloved Betsy. Settling back in on land and sometimes wondering if it was all a dream, we've reflected back on that mission statement we had for ourselves before we left. What did we accomplish, or were we even supposed to accomplish something? And, taking a look at our mission statement, we did come closer as a family. It was hard to assess when you're with someone for 24/7 for a couple of years, but I think we did come closer. And rushing around, we really never did that. Our calendar, although we didn't have one, would have been completely empty for months at a time. As far as carbon footprint, I think a good assumption is the amount of money you spend is proportional to the amount of environmental impact you have on the world. And in that category, we scored quite well. As far as nature, we all came away with a huge appreciation for the wonderful natural world. And warm, well, yeah, we were warm. Now it's a little different story. And unconventional. Now this is an interesting one. We certainly did something that's considered unconventional. To quit working is, not an option for many and not considered by most. Looking back, I think this unconventional choice taught us a life lesson that couldn't be learned by taking a vacation trip or some other way. We learned that despite the prominence of that our culture puts on work and possessions, they're not the most important thing in life. Instead, we found out what our highest priorities were. Thank you.